I've rebuilt the filter caps, and you've seen on some of my other videos and other folks also, is the way I did it is I went about halfway, and I like to rebuild these. You can really do a whole lot because they've got the clamp on them that holds it together, so it really reinforces. And what I do is about midway on the can itself of this strap, I'll cut it all the way around and take all the insides out, drill holes to bring the leads out on the bottom where they need to be. Then I'll put some epoxy and I will glue the can tops, crimp those in a little bit on the bottom so it'll slide down on top, and then I put the glue to it and let it set, and then the clamps themselves will hold the cans in place. So it's basically a restuff. I went to put some heat shrink on these leads, and they were just so brittle. So what I'm going to do is I've taken the clamshells off, and I'm going to go up in here and cut it and replace the leads. Hopefully I got the color wires to do the color code and redo it, and I'll heat shrink where I make the splices up in here. I replaced the wires that I felt like needed it. These are very flexible and they're in good shape, so I didn't change those, but I changed and color coded it and marked them just like I did. And the color code may not be the modern color code, but according to the Philco color code on this particular transformer, this is what it is. Instead, this one is black with yellow, but it's I didn't have a yellow marker to go on the black, so I made do with that. But I just felt a whole lot better replacing these, because these things were cracking and brittle, and the heat shrink would have worked, but I think this is a lot better. We're going to rebuild some of these Bakelite block capacitors. I'm going to take a few minutes, not necessarily to show you exactly what I did or anything like that, not step by step, but just give you an overview and talk a little bit about these things. There's some of the folks I've talked to are a little bit intimidated by these, but if you'll think of them as a terminal block and a storage unit, that's all that is. The capacitors are inside, and then you've got three connections on this one particularly. The one that's closest to the mounting hole is number 1, 2, and 3. And some of these will have 6, but typically they're all the same, just 3. Now some of these will have resistors in them, and most of them that I've run into do not. Now this one has a ground terminal because the bolt will go through here, the screw will go through here and connect it to the chassis. So this first one, as it's connected here, is the ground. So it will be the ground side of the capacitors. And in that case, a lot of times that will be the common point. Here's one that does not have a ground. Okay? And so the website that I use before I get into that, what I did is I disconnected the capacitor leads on this side, desoldered them, and then I took a hairdryer and heated it up. And this is very brittle, so be careful prying it. And then I just took my little dental tool and picked the tar out, and here are the capacitors that were in there. Now I wish that I had noticed and they all came out and broke apart before I could see what terminals they were on. So using that website, and I've used it before in the past, and it'll be on the bottom of the screen and also in the comments or the description page. And so I've cleaned this out, and looking at the website on this particular picture on this page, it shows a list of discontinued or obsolete blocks, and as you see, this particular number 7762B is that. But then it tells the replacement, and we'll go to the next page, and it's a 7762 what was that, 62, I can't read it, OEU. Now here's one of the problems that intimidate people, and it can cause a lot of problems. So I'm warning you right up front. If you'll look at this chart here, it says that pins 1 and 3 has the 0.001 capacitor. And then if you'll look, pins 1 and 2 have the 0.015 capacitor. Okay, so that means that the 1 was the common one, which is ground. If you compare this wiring diagram of the capacitors that's in here to your schematic, you will see that this 0.015 capacitor is a coupling capacitor, and it cannot go to ground. So, and I went back and I did a Google search and found it on antique radio forums. I find that doing that, it's easier to find the stuff on there than going through their search engine. It's just a personal preference myself. But I found data probably 20 years old, and this particular block is wired differently than what the data sheet on this website shows. So the 0.001 capacitor will go from the number 3 terminal to the ground. Then the 0.015 coupling capacitor will go between terminals 2 and 3. And here you'll see both those capacitors on this schematic, and why that 0.015 cannot go to ground. I've rebuilt all the Bakelite block capacitors in this set. There's 4 of them, and towards the end of this section, I'll show the schematic of all the numbers and the schematics of what's inside the blocks. Found that one of them, and we've already talked about it, has been was different. So I'll post a screenshot of the schematics of all these blocks, so anybody's working on one in the future will have that to reference. As we go on, here's C27. As I told you before, sometimes I leave the components on. This particular component, it's within 15%, so I'm not going to change it. And I put extra wire on there. But this particular one, if you'll look, this is how the original schematic shows it. And if you'll notice, it shows it going to ground, and there's no ground on this. Look at the schematic, and this is the original. Now, here is the Ron Ramirez updated, and you can find that on the Philco website, Philco forum, and you'll see how it actually is tied below the resistor, and it's not going to ground. So this capacitor is wired differently than the inside is fine, but in the schematic it shows up different, as you can very well see. Here's another one. I've replaced the resistors. They were out of tolerance, so I put those, left them in there, and should be able to bolt that right in there, and all of them are back in place. Here is another one. Remember the resistor. This is well within tolerance, and I've said in the past it was everyone I've ever checked of these works. The other thing that's inside here, and there's another capacitor that's not really listed, but it's C32 is inside here, which is goes on the line to the chassis ground. So what I did on the primary, so I took and put a safety cap in on that particular one, but that's C32. This the schematic shows C32, but in the layout there's no C32 showing where it's at. But so that's where it gets confusing. Sometimes you have to go and look inside the schematic to find these things. I've got a lot of components put back in. As you can see, the transformer and the new wires, got all those labeled, and they'll be ready to go back in. Some of these wires haven't been replaced yet, but I will as I get to them. Got all the coils back, and I've still got to come down here and clean all the trimmers in the back and get ready to put those in. Also, got the wires for the tuning condenser, and got the wires for the grid caps up on top. So we're about ready to put this thing all back together and start wiring it and everything like that. And that'll be the fun part, and really enjoy just taking my time and wiring it back together and tracing it out and what have you. That's, to me, that's where a lot of the fun, after all the hard work of cleaning and everything, then tracing the circuits out and making sure you get it wired back in place, and then trying to make it work. So that's going to wrap up this part 4, and so then in part 5 we'll start putting this all back together again. So everybody, I appreciate you hanging with me, and all my subscribers and all my comments and everything. I really appreciate that. So at this point in time, it probably won't get another one out before Christmas. It's about a little over a week, about a week and a half from Christmas. So I'll go ahead and wish everybody a Merry Christmas. So from Larry, from the hills of Tennessee, Merry Christmas, and thank you for watching.